My name's David, and I've always considered myself an average guy living an average life. I work as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in Boston, a job that pays well enough to keep us comfortable. My wife Jessica and I have been married for 12 years. We live in a cozy two-story house in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where you know your neighbors and everyone waves hello. Jessica is a striking woman, with a personality to match her looks. She's always been the life of the party, the kind of person who lights up a room just by walking in. We met in college and it was love at first sight. Or at least, that's what I thought. Over the years, we've built a life together filled with laughter, memories, and what I believed was a deep connection. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Our home is our sanctuary. Jessica has a knack for interior design, and she's turned our house into a warm, inviting space. We host dinner parties, game nights, and BBQs in our backyard during the summer. Our friends and family often comment on how perfect our life seems, but appearances can be deceiving. It was a typical Tuesday evening when my world started to unravel. Jessica and I were having dinner together, the usual small talk filling the space between us. She seemed distracted, her eyes darting to her phone every few minutes. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, she often received messages from her friends or her job at odd hours. Jessica works in marketing, and her job sometimes requires her to be available outside of the usual 9 to 5. Our neighborhood is a quiet one, the kind of place where the biggest excitement is the occasional garage sale or block party. It's a good place to raise a family, though Jessica and I never had kids. We talked about it early in our marriage, but decided we enjoyed our freedom too much. We filled our time with travel, hobbies, and each other, or so I thought. That evening, as Jessica picked at her food and checked her phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was a small thing, a whisper of intuition that told me to pay closer attention. I brushed it aside, not wanting to be the paranoid husband. But in hindsight, I should have listened to that inner voice. It was the beginning of a journey that would test me in ways I never imagined. It started with the small things, the seemingly insignificant changes that gnaw at the back of your mind. Jessica had always been a social butterfly, but lately her behavior had shifted. She was more secretive, always keeping her phone close, the screen tilted away from me. When I asked who she was texting, she'd laugh it off, saying it was just work or a friend. One Friday evening, she told me she was going out with her girlfriends. Normally, this wouldn't bother me. Jessica often went out with her friends, and I trusted her completely. But that night, something felt different. She spent an unusually long time getting ready, and when she left, she was dressed more provocatively than usual. I tried to push the unease aside, convincing myself that I was overreacting. As the weeks went by, the signs became harder to ignore. Jessica's late nights out became more frequent. She'd come home smelling of alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers, her excuses growing flimsier each time. We had a few drinks after work, she'd say, or I lost track of time. But it wasn't just the nights out. During the day, she seemed distant, her mind elsewhere even when we were together. One evening, I came home early from work. Jessica wasn't expecting me, and when I walked into the house, I found her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. She looked startled when she saw me, quickly ending the call and claiming it was just a work thing. But the look in her eyes told a different story. I began to notice other odd behaviors. She started wearing more makeup, buying new clothes, and paying extra attention to her appearance. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying she just wanted to feel good about herself. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One night as we lay in bed, I decided to bring it up. "Jess, is everything okay? You seem different lately." She turned to me, her expression a mix of annoyance and defensiveness. "What do you mean? Everything's fine, David. You're just imagining things." But I wasn't imagining things. The distance between us was growing, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I started to pay closer attention, looking for clues that might explain her behavior. It felt wrong, like I was invading her privacy, but I needed to know what was going on. A few days later, I found the first real hint that something was amiss. Jessica had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and a message popped up on the screen from someone named Mike. The message was casual enough, but there was a familiarity to it that made my heart sink. I didn't recognize the name, and when I asked Jessica about it, She said he was just a colleague. Why are you being so paranoid, David? Mike's just a friend from work. We talk about projects, that's all. I wanted to believe her, but the doubts were already planted. Over the next few weeks, I started to notice more and more messages from Mike. They were never overtly suspicious, but the frequency and the tone of their conversations raised red flags. Jessica's laughter as she read his messages, the way she quickly closed her laptop when I walked into the room. It all added up to something I couldn't ignore. Then there was the night she came home particularly late. She had told me she was meeting a client for dinner, but when she stumbled through the door around midnight, her clothes disheveled and her makeup smudged, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Jess, this has to stop. What's really going on? She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance. I told you, David, it's just work. You're being ridiculous. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze. There was something she wasn't telling me, something that was eating away at the foundation of our marriage. And I was determined to find out what it was, even if it meant confronting a truth I wasn't ready to face. My suspicions continued to grow, and the tension in our home was palpable. Jessica and I barely spoke, the distance between us widening with each passing day. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught between wanting to believe her and the overwhelming evidence that something was terribly wrong. One day, while Jessica was out, I decided to check the home security cameras. We had installed them a few years ago for safety, but I had never really paid much attention to them. As I scrolled through the footage, my heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I needed to know the truth. The cameras recorded everything: the living room, the kitchen, the front and back doors. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, feeling like a voyeur in my own home. And then, I saw it. A moment that shattered any lingering doubts I had. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and Jessica had come home early. She wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize followed her inside, his arm around her waist. They were laughing, their bodies close. Jessica led him into the living room, and my heart sank as I watched them kiss. It was passionate, intense, something I hadn't seen from her in years. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. I watched as they moved to the couch, their hands all over each other. It was clear this wasn't the first time they had done this. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife was having an affair, and she had brought him into our home. I fast-forwarded through the footage, my anger growing with each passing second. They didn't stop at the couch. They moved to the bedroom, our bedroom. The betrayal was complete, and I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was a violation of everything our marriage stood for, everything I had believed in. I sat there numb as the footage continued to play. I knew I needed to confront Jessica, but I wanted more evidence. I needed to be sure there was no way she could talk her way out of this. I started checking the other cameras, hoping to find more proof. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with the footage. I watched hours and hours of it, piecing together the extent of her betrayal. Each clip was a dagger to the heart, showing me just how deep her deceit went. She had brought him to our home multiple times, always when she thought I wouldn't be there. They laughed, they kissed, they fucked, all under the roof I had worked so hard to provide for us. One evening, as I sat in front of the screen, I decided to take it a step further. I set up additional cameras in the house, hidden ones that Jessica wouldn't know about. If she was going to bring him here again, I wanted to capture everything. It felt wrong, invasive, but I needed to know the full extent of what was happening. It didn't take long for my suspicions to be confirmed. The very next week, Jessica brought him back. I watched in real time as they entered the house, their hands already exploring each other's bodies. This time I recorded it all, every moment of their betrayal. When they moved to the bedroom, I clenched my fists, feeling a mix of rage and helplessness. I wanted to burst in, to confront them, to make them pay for what they were doing, but I held back. I needed this evidence, needed to confront Jessica with irrefutable proof. As they fucked in our bed, I recorded everything, my emotions a swirling storm of anger, heartbreak, and disgust. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, and she was betraying me in the worst possible way. When it was over, I sat in the dark, the footage playing on a loop in my mind. I knew what I had to do next. There was no going back from this. The trust was shattered. The love we once shared now tainted by her infidelity. It was time to confront Jessica and face the reality of our broken marriage. After capturing the undeniable proof of Jessica's affair, I knew I had to act. The rage and betrayal burned deep within me, and I needed to make sure she felt the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to understand the full extent of her betrayal and to face the judgment of those she had deceived. It was a Friday evening when I finally put my plan into motion. Jessica had gone out, presumably with her lover, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the damning footage. I spent hours carefully preparing my revenge, ensuring that every detail was perfect. First, I compiled the most incriminating clips into a single video. I included timestamps, highlighting the times and dates she brought her lover into our home. I made sure to show their intimacy, the moments that would leave no room for doubt about their relationship. I edited the video meticulously, making it clear that this was a repeated betrayal, not a one-time mistake. The next step was distributing the video. I started with her coworkers. Jessica worked at a marketing firm, and I had her boss's email from a company event we had attended a few years back. I sent the video to her boss and several of her colleagues, ensuring that the subject line would grab their attention. Urgent: Jessica's unprofessional conduct. Next, I turned to her friends. Jessica had a close-knit group, and I knew their contact information from various gatherings and social media. I sent the video to them with a simple message. This is what Jessica has been hiding. Her family was more challenging, but I managed to find the email addresses and phone numbers of her parents and siblings. They were always supportive of our marriage, and it pained me to drag them into this, but I needed them to see the truth. I sent the video to them as well, adding a personal note. I thought you deserved to know what Jessica has been doing behind my back. Finally, I targeted her lover's family. From the footage, I had managed to gather enough information about him to track down his social media profiles. It wasn't hard to find his family members. I sent the video to them with a brief message. Your son is having an affair with my wife. With the emails and messages sent, I sat back and waited. I knew the fallout would be immense, but I needed to see it happen. I needed to know that Jessica would face the consequences of her actions. It didn't take long for the responses to start pouring in. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from her coworkers, friends, and family. The messages ranged from shock and disbelief to anger and support. Some of her friends tried to defend her, claiming there must be some mistake, but the video left little room for doubt. Jessica's family was devastated. Her mother called me, her voice trembling with emotion. David, I don't know what to say. I can't believe she would do this. I'm so sorry. Her father, usually a man of few words, expressed his disappointment in a terse email. We will speak to her. Thank you for letting us know. Her coworkers were equally stunned. Her boss replied with a curt message, promising to address the matter internally. I knew this would likely impact her career, but that was the least of my concerns. The important thing was that her duplicity was exposed. The most satisfying response came from her lover's family. His mother sent a furious message, condemning her son for his actions and vowing to confront him. The thought of their confrontation brought a grim smile to my face. At least someone else would feel the weight of this betrayal. Jessica returned home later that night, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. When she walked in, I was sitting on the couch, my laptop open in front of me. She gave me a wary look, sensing that something was wrong. David, what's going on? She asked, her voice tense. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I turned the laptop towards her, playing the video I had compiled. Her eyes widened in horror as she watched herself on the screen, her betrayal laid bare for all to see. How could you? I said, my voice cold and steady. How could you bring him into our home, into our bed? Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. The time for tears was long past. David, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I've already sent the video to everyone. Your friends, your family, your co-workers, and his family too. Everyone knows, Jessica. Everyone. She sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Why? Why would you do this to me? Why? I repeated, incredulous. You destroyed our marriage, Jessica. You lied to me, betrayed me, and brought another man into our home. Did you really think there would be no consequences? The look on her face was one of pure devastation, but I felt no pity. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I stood up, grabbing my coat. I'm leaving. I need some time to think. Don't be here when I get back. As I walked out the door, her sobs echoed in the empty house. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. My revenge was complete, but the pain of her betrayal still lingered. It would take time to heal, but at least now, everyone knew the truth. I spent the night in a hotel, trying to calm my raging thoughts. The satisfaction of exposing Jessica's betrayal had quickly given way to an emptiness that gnawed at my insides. I knew the confrontation awaiting me at home would be brutal, but it was a necessary step in facing the reality of our broken marriage. When I returned the next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Jessica was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up as I walked in, a mixture of fear and anger etched on her face. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. "There's nothing left to say," I replied, my tone flat. "I've seen everything. You lied to me, you betrayed me, and now everyone knows what you've done." She stood up, her hands trembling. "I know I messed up, but you didn't have to destroy my life, my job, my friends, my family. How could you do that to me? How could I do that to you?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You brought this on yourself, Jessica. You didn't just cheat on me. You brought him into our home, into our bed. You humiliated me. Did you really think there would be no consequences?" She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I made a mistake, David. A terrible mistake. But did you have to ruin everything? Couldn't we have handled this privately?" I shook my head, the anger boiling over. "Handled it privately? You mean like how you handled your affair privately, making sure I wouldn't find out? You made your choices, Jessica. You have to live with them." She collapsed back onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you like this." "Well, you did," I said, my voice cold. "And now it's over." Her eyes widened in panic. "Over? You mean—" "Yes," I said firmly. "I want a divorce." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Jessica looked like she had been punched in the gut. "David, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, try to fix this. I still love you." I felt a pang of sadness at her words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. "It's too late for that, Jessica. The trust is gone. There's no fixing this." She sobbed uncontrollably, but I couldn't let myself feel sympathy. I had to stay strong for my own sake. I turned and walked towards the stairs, needing to put some distance between us. "David, wait!" she called after me. "Please, just listen to me." I stopped but didn't turn around. "What is there to listen to, Jessica? More lies? More excuses?" She stood up, desperation in her voice. "No, the truth. I need to tell you why this happened." I turned to face her, my expression hard. "Fine. Talk." She took a deep breath, her words coming out in a rush. "I felt so lonely, David. You were always working, always busy. I know you were doing it for us, but I needed you. I needed someone to talk to, someone to make me feel loved." I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my anger in check. "So you found someone else? Someone to fuck while I was out working to support us?" She flinched at my words, but pressed on. "It wasn't just about the sex. It was about feeling wanted, feeling like I mattered. I know I messed up, but I was so unhappy. I didn't know how to fix it." "You could have talked to me," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have told me how you felt instead of sneaking around behind my back." "I tried," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But every time I did, you were too busy or too tired. I felt like I was invisible." I stared at her, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. "So you decided to hurt me instead? To destroy everything we built together?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you, David. Give me a chance to make this right." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her another chance, but the pain of her betrayal was too deep, too raw. "I can't," I said finally, my voice firm. "I can't get past what you've done. It's over, Jessica. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I turned and walked away, my heart heavy. I knew this was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. As I packed my things, I thought about the years we had spent together, the good times and the bad. It was hard to reconcile the woman I had loved with the person she had become. But I knew I had to move on, to rebuild my life without her. When I walked out the door, I didn't look back. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and I knew I could survive whatever came next. The days following our confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I stayed with a friend for a while, needing space to process everything that had happened. My friend Mark had been through a messy divorce himself and offered both a place to stay and a sympathetic ear. "Man, it's going to be rough," he said one evening over a beer. "But you're doing the right thing. Staying in a relationship without trust is a recipe for misery." I nodded, appreciating his support. "I know, it's just... I never thought it would come to this. 12 years, gone just like that." Mark clapped me on the shoulder. "You'll get through it, David. One step at a time." Taking his advice to heart, I contacted a divorce lawyer, Susan Harris. She came highly recommended and had a reputation for being tough but fair. During our first meeting, I laid out everything that had happened, from my suspicions to the damning video footage. Susan listened attentively, taking notes. "David, you have a strong case for divorce on grounds of adultery. Given the evidence, we should be able to negotiate favorable terms for you, including keeping the house and securing a fair division of assets." "Thank you, Susan," I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. "I just want this to be over as quickly and painlessly as possible." She gave me a reassuring smile. "I'll do everything I can to make that happen. But be prepared. Divorce is never easy, especially when emotions are running high." True to her word, Susan moved swiftly. She filed the divorce papers, citing Jessica's infidelity as the primary reason. Jessica was served at work, and I knew it must have been a humiliating experience for her. But she had brought this upon herself. A few days later, Jessica called me, her voice trembling. "David, can we please talk?" I hesitated but agreed. We met at a neutral location, a quiet park where we could have some privacy. When I arrived, she was already there, looking more fragile than I had ever seen her. "David, She struggled to find the words. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to comprehend. But please, can we try to work things out? For the sake of everything we've built together?" I shook my head, feeling a pang of sadness. "Jessica, I can't. The trust is gone, and without that, there's no foundation to rebuild on. I need to move on, and so do you." She wiped away tears, her shoulders shaking. "I understand. I wish things could have been different." "Me too," I said softly. "But we can't change the past. We can only move forward." The days leading up to the trial were tense. Susan prepared me for what to expect, ensuring that I had all the necessary documents and evidence. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. Jessica was there with her own lawyer, looking pale and exhausted. The proceedings were straightforward, given the overwhelming evidence of her infidelity. Susan presented our case clearly and concisely, leaving no room for doubt. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue for a more favorable division of assets, but the judge was unsympathetic. In the end, I was awarded the house and a fair share of our joint savings. Jessica would keep her personal belongings and some money, but it was clear that her actions had cost her dearly. As the judge finalized the divorce, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was officially over. The marriage that had once been my whole world was now legally dissolved. I glanced over at Jessica, who was silently crying. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She had made terrible choices, but those choices had come with their own heavy consequences. After the trial, we had one last conversation outside the courthouse. It was a chance to say goodbye, to close this painful chapter of our lives. "David, I know you probably hate me," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I don't hate you, Jessica. I'm hurt and angry, yes, but I don't hate you." I hope you find the happiness you were looking for, and I hope you learn from this. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. I wish you all the best, David. You deserve to be happy. With that, we parted ways. I walked to my car, feeling a mix of emotions. Sadness for what had been lost, relief that it was finally over, and a tentative hope for the future. It was time to start rebuilding my life, one step at a time. Starting over was daunting, but I knew it was necessary. The first few weeks after the divorce were a whirlwind of emotions. There were days when I felt a profound sense of relief, and other days when the loneliness and betrayal felt like a weight I couldn't shake off. But with each passing day, the wound began to heal, slowly but surely. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and responsibilities. My colleagues noticed the change in me and offered their support. Mark, my friend who had given me a place to stay, was particularly encouraging. "You need to get out, man," he said one Friday evening. "Come on, let's hit the town. You deserve to have some fun." At first, I was hesitant. The idea of going out and socializing felt foreign after everything I'd been through. But Mark was persistent, and eventually, I agreed. We went to a local bar, a place I hadn't visited in years. The atmosphere was lively, filled with people laughing and enjoying themselves. It felt good to be out of the house, to be part of the world again. Mark introduced me to some of his friends, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself genuinely smiling and laughing. It was there that I met Emma. She was a friend of one of Mark's colleagues, a kind-hearted woman with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor. We struck up a conversation, and it wasn't long before I felt a connection. Emma had been through her own share of heartache, and we bonded over our shared experiences. Over the next few weeks, we spent more and more time together. Emma was a breath of fresh air, someone who understood the pain of betrayal, but also believed in the possibility of new beginnings. She helped me see that my past didn't have to define my future. We went on long walks, had dinners, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Emma had a way of making me feel at ease, of reminding me that there was still so much to look forward to in life. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, I realized that I was falling for her. "Emma," I said, taking her hand in mine, "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you to be a part of it." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "David, I've felt the same way for a while now. Let's take it one day at a time and see where it leads us." As our relationship grew, so did my sense of self. I started to rediscover the things I loved: photography, hiking, and even cooking. Emma encouraged me to pursue my passions, to embrace the things that made me happy. It was a process of rebuilding, of finding the pieces of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of my marriage. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the mountains. It was a chance to escape the city and immerse ourselves in nature. We hiked through the trails, the crisp air and stunning views a reminder of the beauty that still existed in the world. Sitting by a campfire one night, under a canopy of stars, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. "Thank you, Emma," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for helping me find myself again." She leaned in, resting her head on my shoulder. "David, you did the hard work. I'm just glad I could be here with you." Life began to settle into a new rhythm. Work was fulfilling, my relationships with friends and family grew stronger, and Emma became an integral part of my life. There were still moments of sadness, of course. Memories of Jessica and the life we once shared would surface, but they no longer had the power to pull me under. One day, as Emma and I were having breakfast, she looked at me thoughtfully. "David, have you ever considered going to therapy? It might help you process everything that's happened." I had thought about it but hadn't taken the step. Her suggestion made me realize it was time to address the lingering wounds. I found a therapist, Dr. Jacobs, who specialized in dealing with trauma and betrayal. Therapy was challenging, but it was also incredibly healing. Dr. Jacobs helped me understand the depth of my pain and guided me through the process of forgiveness, not just of Jessica, but of myself. I had carried a lot of guilt, feeling that I should have seen the signs, that I should have done more. But through therapy, I learned to let go of those burdens and embrace the present. As the months passed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I started volunteering at a local community center, using my skills to help others who were going through difficult times. It was a way of giving back, of finding meaning in my experiences. One evening, Emma and I attended a charity event. As we mingled with the crowd, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. The pain of the past had transformed into a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I realized that the journey through betrayal had led me to a place of resilience and hope. "David, you've become so strong," Emma said, squeezing my hand. "I'm so proud of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma. You've been my rock." We danced that night, surrounded by friends and strangers, the music a backdrop to the celebration of new beginnings. As we swayed to the rhythm, I knew that the future was bright, that I'd found love and happiness once again. In the end, the betrayal that had shattered my world became the catalyst for a new chapter filled with growth, love, and self-discovery. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, but I had learned to face them head-on, to embrace the journey and find joy in the unexpected. Emma and I continued to build our life together, each day a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I had found my way through the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. As I looked into Emma's eyes that night, I knew that I had finally found my way home.